of Dia, and we're going to change gears here a little bit and go from the world of venture investing in data to building fashion brands with data, which has been a fun area of work for us. Oh, the big green one. That makes sense. All right, so we're going to start with a question, which everyone knows the answer to, but how many people got up and put on clothes this morning? If you did not raise your hand, I'm not sure what, I can see everyone from the audience, and I'm pretty sure the answer was yes. It turns out that this is an answer that's true around the world, and as a result, apparel is one of the biggest industries in the world. It is bigger than the automotive industry and many entertainment industries. It is also one of the rare growth stories in the last 10 years, which I think has been really interesting. What the high-level numbers don't reveal, though, is that if you start peeling away what's actually happening in the apparel industry, there's some really interesting things happening under the surface. One of those things which we discovered, well, not discovered, but which we saw, was the fact that in some categories, spend is very lopsided. And if you actually look at what spend looks like across different categories of consumers, it's it's really shocking. One category that we are obviously most focused on is the plus-size women's apparel category, and that is a category that exhibits some of the most interesting dynamics that we've ever seen from a consumer market perspective. Nearly 70% of women in the US wear a size 14 and above, which is what the industry classifies as a plus-size woman. And yet only 16% of clothing that's bought in the US is bought in those sizes, which is really an astounding imbalance. When you look at that on a per capita basis, the spend difference is really remarkable. Plus-size women are spending 20 cents on the dollar to what straight-size women are spending on apparel. And if you multiply that by the total size of the addressable market, so 70% of adult women in the US is about 100 million women, the annual opportunity that's being ignored here is really, really large. So obviously the $80 billion question is why? Why does this look the way that it does? I think most people look at these numbers and assume that there's some kind of a demand problem. There must be something that is preventing these women from, got more time on the clock, preventing these women from spending. And really one of the most fundamental premises of our business is that that's absolutely false. Right? The premise of our business is that this is a supply side failure and that these women are just as interested in fashion, just as excited about shopping. I have been this woman all my life, so I know that to be true not only as a consumer, but also as an operator now in the category. And really answering this problem is what inspired us to start the company, and really the core of the problem that we've been working on for the last 2.5 years. So Dia is now 2.5 years old. We're the leading digital-first retailer dedicated to serving plus-size women. And really, oh, wrong direction. I'll go through in a second what that looks like, but I think really understanding the magnitude of the gap here has been really interesting for us to dig into, and really starting to quantify what some of the things that are really preventing her from shopping are and how we can address them. It turns out that the two biggest challenges that we're starting with are actual distribution, how she is experiencing the product. The second one, which has been a really interesting body of work for us on the data science side, is what she has access to. How can we improve the actual supply of garments in the space such that she can not only shop what she wants, but how she wants. So in the simplest view from the customer's perspective, the way that it works today is that customers log on to our site. They share a lot of really thoughtful feedback with us about what they're looking for, who they are, all kinds of data. We use that both, both machines and humans are involved in really figuring out what this customer should receive in a first box. That's the beginning of an iterative and long-term relationship with our customers where she's providing feedback, we're incorporating that feedback, and using it not only to provide better recommendations for her going forward, but the really interesting body of work for us has actually been creating better content, better garments for her to actually see. So one of the other distinct characteristics of our customer, and it's logical if you think about it, it's an enormous addressable market, deeply underserved. The brand is able to resonate with a very diverse group of women. And one of the ways that is easiest to kind of describe that is in geographic diversity of our customer base. So this is when we launched in May 2015. And even in our first cohort, we had customers in more zip codes than we would have expected. Over the course of the last 2 years, this is a year later, and this is a year after that, the map has filled in. I did not rerun this for today, but we've now worked with over 1 million women and have customers in 90% of zip codes in the country. So the really interesting problem this sets up for us is really thinking about how do we create exceptional experiences for women, both on the content and on the distribution side, and do that across an incredibly diverse group of customers. And with that, I will hand it over to my colleague, Christa.
Which one do I? It's the big one. Okay. All right. So you can imagine that once we have this many customers, that we want to be able to make sure that we are able to match great content with the right customer. And so I think this probably sounds pretty obvious to everybody, right? Like what we would actually do next. And so this is clearly a recommendations problem. And it should be a familiar problem for a lot of companies, right? And so we have the Netflix example here. But the reason we're showing the Netflix example is not because it's just a recommendations problem, but because there's something actually, there's a little nuance here in this slide that really describes the crux of the problem for us. And so, and what the crux of that problem is what content we are able to offer her. So I said earlier, our job is to match great content with the right customer. What if we don't actually have great content? What are we supposed to do? And so this leaves us in this situation right here where our company is vulnerable in a couple ways. One, we're vulnerable for vendors and their pricing, right? We're beholden to them and whatever they would like to charge for the content that's available. We're also limited in the fact that some of the best content out there can either be very expensive or it can be only allowed in exclusive deals. And so even if we have great content for plus-size women, we don't always have access to that content. And so that leaves us in a position where we're vulnerable to our competitors. In general, to sum up the problem, though, what we have are limited options for our customers. And when you have limited options for your customer, no recommendation engine, no matter how good that algorithm is actually going to succeed to help you solve that particular problem. And so that's the problem that we ultimately have set out to address. And so we're showing this slide because it's a great example, again, a familiar problem to us, right? Our goal here is to create original content for our customers so that she always has access to buy the things that she wants to buy. The amount of original content that's available for the straight size market is dramatically more than it is for the plus size market, and we need to be able to close this gap. And so, how are we actually doing this? Well, we do it with a combination of techniques. And so first and foremost, you want to start with analytics, right? This is the best way to go after your low-hanging fruit. And then you want to layer in some human expertise. So we have a staff of designers and stylists that help us in this particular area. And then finally, once you have brought these two elements together, you can move on to machine learning and really picking the right machine learning problem to solve in order to address your need. So I'm going to start with analytics, just because we have 3 different kinds of data here that were important to us. The first is the behavioral data. This is all of the data we have about our customer. We're very lucky, like most content companies. You can think of fashion as content. We're very lucky in the sense that we have her purchase history. We know what she likes. We know what she doesn't like. We know why she didn't like it or why she loved it, because she likes to share that kind of information with us. So we have a lot of detailed data about what works for her and what doesn't work for her. What's missing, though, is, again, coming down to that content problem. If you have a lack of great content, then your data set on the behavioral side is going to be biased toward the content that you actually have, right? So you need to expand out beyond that. And so the next place you can expand to is her stated preference data. So this is a disconnected data set that you can capture that's separate from behavioral data. And what this tells us is what styles she's looking for, what occasions she's trying to dress for, what roles she may have in her life, et cetera. Things that will help us understand how we might actually want to style her. But then think about when we perhaps captured some of this data. A lot of these customers were early adopters of ours, and we don't necessarily want to just rely on our early adopters for understanding what it is that the plus-size woman is actually looking for in fashion. And so we expanded beyond that to ask the market in general and conducted a survey trying to understand exactly what it is that she is lacking in her choices today. And what we ended up with was, I think, very interesting information, and I'm just going to summarize it as we have 7 product lines that we essentially identified where there was a gap in the market. And if you think about that, that's actually a lot. If you can think that right off the bat with just analytics, you can identify 7 major product lines of fashion that are missing for this particular customer. So now that we have that identified, the next thing we need to do is layer in our human expertise. And so our humans are actually stylists and designers. And the way that they think about clothes is very different than the way that maybe you and I think about clothes. So I think the first thing we want to learn from them is they see this data and they say, oh, okay, classic. Classic is a style that is missing for our customer, and our designers immediately know what it means when classic is missing. But how do you teach a machine to potentially understand what that means? You have to understand what the designers are actually doing. So what is actually in a style? And I'm going to now refer to my sweater as an example. So if everyone is actually looking at my sweater right now, you can notice a few things almost immediately. Most customers, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to have an emotional reaction to it, right? They're going to say, oh, I hate that sweater, or I love that sweater, or somewhere in between. I like it, but I would never wear it. It's just that kind of reaction, but it's not something that you can really work with, right? But the way a designer or a stylist looks at this sweater, and I'm going to break it down now as quickly as I can, is the first thing that designer might notice is that there's a photorealistic tiger on the front of my sweater, right? Now there's also stripes, but they're just on my sleeves, so they're stripes being used in a novel way. So that's the obvious stuff. Then there's also the color red. That's a very classic color. But then the designer is going to look at it deeper and say, that's a crew neck. That's a long sleeve sweater. That's made of cashmere, and it has a very tailored fit. And so now we're looking at mostly a classic sweater with a few edgy elements added to it. And so then it becomes a matter of how you weight those edgy embellishments against what is otherwise, if you took away the embellishments, I'd be basically wearing like a J. Crew navy blue cashmere sweater, right? It wouldn't be very exciting. And so there you go. That's basically what designers are doing. And so for us at that point, the job becomes taking that and turning that into an actual machine learning product so that we can learn the same things about the clothes that we have and figure out what's actually missing. And so here's an example of all the many necklines, for instance, that a designer might actually be considering. There's quite a few of them, right? And we want to potentially learn what all of these are. The skirts are a set of silhouettes that are all, again, very different, that we would want to learn what they actually are. And so our approach to this is to first, well, it's a deep learning approach. It's a computer vision problem, right? And we are a small data shop. We're not a big data shop. And so we have to take a pre-trained model, and then we retrain that model to learn the attributes that we actually care about. But it's not just a simple matter of let's learn a neckline. What if you're looking at the back of a garment as opposed to the front of the garment, right? And so you have to take it, you have to basically break it down to the smallest number of steps possible in order to be able to first understand what angle you're looking at, then maybe understand your neckline and sleeve length and your color and so on and so forth, and maybe wait for embellishments until the end. And so this is what we aim to do, and we aim to do it so that we can bring some nuance to the lines that we know that are missing today. And so we basically take all of this data together and turn it into a recommendation, essentially, for the designers and the stylists in terms of what is actually missing. And a great example of this is an obvious classic example would be stripes, very clean stripes with navy and white. And What might not be so obvious is something called conversational icons. Conversational icons are an element of classic design that maybe not everyone knows about, but designers know about them, and you wouldn't necessarily know on the surface that they're missing from your product line unless you've actually gone out and attempted to identify what you have and see what's missing. And so it's that kind of nuance that we are hoping to bring to the designers and how we evolve our product lines for our customer.
So this is a really exciting body of work that we've really just scratched the surface of. As Christa mentioned, we've launched 7 brands so far, really based on this approach of thinking about not only, this is a brand, for example, that launched recently that's a very kind of classic all-American line, and so obviously the stripes that Christa mentioned are on this blouse. If this model had turned around, you'd see some interesting detailing on the back that's more to the nuance of what we're learning about what she likes and what she doesn't like, not only at the aesthetic level, but really at the garment attribute level. That can be really interesting combinations. So I'm gonna play you guys a little video. So we did launch 7 brands this year. Really, I think is just the beginning of what's gonna be possible when you think about the magnitude of the problem that we're solving. 4 of these brands launched at Fashion Week in September. And we were able to really kind of show these designs with the world. And I think, the ultimate measure of success for us was not just how awesome these clothes are that are coming down the runway, because they were pretty awesome, but really, the reactions of the women in the audience and seeing how powerful it can be to really understand our customer enough, not only that we can create great experiences for her, but for the first time for her to be able to see her favorite clothing come to life in her size. So that's our work at Dia, and obviously happy to answer any questions.
Just one question for me. Let's talk about maybe the cultural aspects inside the company, being both very creative people who are driven by taste and emotions and experience, and data people. How do you make those two groups work together?
So I'd be interested to hear both of our answers. I think what brings us all together at Dia is our customer. Right? This is a company that was founded exclusively with a focus on a woman who we care about very deeply, and the truth is that underlies the work of our humans and our machines. So I think we're all here for the same reason, but ultimately I think we've been able to strike a nice balance of mutual respect between our humans and our machines, and they tend to work pretty well together. So far so good.
Yeah, I think that's right. For us, our approach is not ever to think about replacing humans or not working without humans. For us, the idea is that we actually want to take advantage of the hybrid nature that we have there and really excel just using those two things. And everyone on the team is really committed to the data space that we're in. It's not the kind of data space that is about the challenge of scaling or anything along those lines. It's the kind where you're really devoted to the mission.
Thank you. It's great to see an apparel company. I work in apparel, and medical research is great with AI, but this is a really smart idea. I think it's awesome work. I was curious, from the personalization standpoint, beyond just recommendations and personalizing product, do you also personalize copy? Do you personalize the tone of the email? Do you get to the point where some customers want more informal, some customers want less formal? And do you incorporate those learnings into your copywriting and your tone?
Do you want to?
Yeah, so I think today we have an understanding of the customers in terms of the type of role she wants to play, in terms of the clothing that she's after. I would say that we customize our content today only in a manual fashion, but we're working toward actually customizing that content in a more automated fashion in the future. So not yet.
I'm an AI and UX person specialized in the retail space. Just like through machine learning, your shirt is a cold shoulder, the other one is a statement. So that's how we do our metadata. It's what I have kind of uncovered is that we really don't have this size issues anymore. It's about who's concentrating on women, like 14 plus. So it's, when you say like you're using machine learning, what are you using machine learning for? For me, for now, is like really isolating, working with Adobe right now, isolating, cherry red from apple red. So what I'm trying to say is that women of any sizes are really trying to see what they should accentuate, which part of their bodies, and what they want to cover up. So it's not a size matter anymore. It's more of identifying like preferences more. So the personalization. So it really doesn't matter whether you're a small size company or a big size company. I would love to continue these conversations, but I'm just saying, what are you specifically using machine learning for?
So we use it for a number of things throughout our business. In this context, we were speaking specifically about auto tagging, because humans, it's hard to scale humans to capture every element about a product that you may want to capture. And so we're attempting to auto tag all of these elements that we care about out of images. That's one example of where we use machine learning. I think recommendations was clearly another place that we're using machine learning. We have so much feedback from our customers. She really gives us a lot of detail. So we use NLP to mine through a lot of that feedback. And so I think we obviously have a physical product as well, and there's an operational component to our work, and there's a lot of work that we're doing in that field as well. So I think it touches for us every part of the business. This was just one area we decided to focus on.
Awesome. Thanks so much.